new instance of a client, and then we're doing client.makeRequest, right? And this should make sense because, right, what a client does is basically interact with that external API, right? So you kind of can imagine think about the return value here, right? This must be probably a list of dictionaries. How would you know that? Well, one, it's plural, right? Restaurant receipts. So that indicates that it's probably a list. And then now what we're doing is probably turning each of those dictionaries into like instances, right? So the fact that I'm just using the word like receipts here kind of like indicates that this thing probably converts these to the actual object, okay? So then you can start looking at it. So now that you have an overall view of like what happens here, right? We make the request to the API, and then we convert the list of dictionaries into instances, and that should be my return value here. One, you could just confirm it, right? You could just do like Python 3-i main. Sorry about that. Let's do exit. Python 3-i. I guess source slash. I should probably move into the source folder. So Python 3-i main.py. You can see it did take a second to like boot up, which tells me it probably was able to connect to the API. And then if I look at what receipts is, right, you can see, okay, these are my instances, right, the list of objects. And then if you take a look at what this previous line is, right, the make request, what this gets back, right, that gets back the list of dictionaries. So, you can kind of just confirm the flow, that we're going from list of dictionaries to list of instances. All right. Now we can just dig into each one of these. So you can see what I did was have this as like a class variable. So for a class variable, all you need to do is just not have the variable inside of an instance method. So this right here, when kind of Python reads this class, it's going to see the name of the class, define a class level variable, and an instance method here, right? That what it does is we use the request library, we get the URL, and then we get back the response and return back the dictionaries, right? So this would be my like client. You can kind of play around with it. Here's my client dot make request, right? And that returns the list of instances. So it just kind of does what we want it to do. Then you take these results here. These are my, sometimes I like to call these like records, or you can call them like dictionaries, but like my restaurant, right? Just something that indicates they're not instances. So restaurant records. And then what do? We go to the adapter, right? So the adapter basically takes our messy data that we get back from the API and then turns it into instances, right? So that's what you can kind of see. The first thing is select the attributes. So first just scope down even what we need here. So all we need is, the address, the end date, like the date that, each that they reported, how much revenue they made, the location, like the restaurant name, and then total receipts. Return a dictionary, right, for each one of these, just the selected attributes. And then we can say, okay, for each of the dictionaries, for each of these restaurant records, right, for each one of these guys, go through each one, scope it down to be just what we need, right? Select the attributes and create a new instance out of it. Okay? Then append that instance to the list and return it. And that's basically it. The only next step would be save it. And obviously to convert this to an object, what we need to do is have declared, or we should call this like a model to be more specific. We should have declared our model, right? So here we have, the 4 attributes we can pass through, and then, we quickly convert this to be an integer, right? And then, just that's basically it. But you can imagine there would be other things here, like a receipt maybe has like the restaurant, something like that, and maybe this would return the restaurant, etc. Right? We could have like our relational methods in here as well. And we should put self in here. Okay, so that is the adapter pattern, right? So the adapter pattern has 3 parts. One is the client, right? The client makes the request, just gets back the results. That's it, okay? The adapter, right, is the part that's like kind of the, convert this to that, right? And what are we doing? We're converting, our messy list of dictionaries, basically the output from the external API, to then suit our code base, right? And then in doing that, what we need to do is scope down just what we need, right? Like we get back a bunch of information, but we don't need all of it. So we just scope it down to a dictionary that we need of the attributes we need, can loop through it, select the attributes for each one. Once we get those scoped attributes, convert it to an instance, append it, and now we have kind of our pretty instances. So that's the whole point. The point of the adapter pattern is, if you think about it, you can't control what you get back from your API. This is our API. And basically, they don't know how you're going to use it. So typically, when you make the request, this is the client, right? It's going to make the request. So when you make the request to the API, you're getting back both information you don't need, and it's messy, right? Because it's all strings, it's not date times and integers, etc. So what do you want to do? You don't want this messy data all throughout your application. So the idea is clean it up as soon as possible. That way you can just work with clean data instead of messy data everywhere, right? Because if you have messy data everywhere you go, you're going to keep making the same conversion. You're going to, constantly convert it to a string. Then the next time you see it, you'll convert it to a string. Just clean it once, right when you get it. So you get back this messy data. You use the adapter, right? That's my adapter. The adapter takes the messy data and then creates instances out of it. And this is like our model. And then and fits it into our clean model, So that would be like our receipt class in this case. And then once you have those instances, you can then just save it. Save each one of them in the database, right? Now throughout the rest of your application. So once it gets here, it's clean, right? Messy, comes back here. This guy does a car wash, cleans it up. Now we save it. Everything's nice and clean. Now the rest of the time, when someone goes and makes a request, makes a GET request to get information about receipts or whatever, what do? Well, everything's cleaned up, basically. We just, select all from receipts, retrieve back the data, create our instances out of them, and basically, then convert it to JSON and send them back to the user. But we're done working, to a certain extent, we've done the cleaning part already. So we don't have to worry about working with messy data anymore and all this extra data. That's the idea of the adapter pattern. Okay? Let me see. There was a question. So the adapter is the transformation layer. Exactly. So Narapati asks, so the adapter class is the transformation layer in ETL. That's exactly right. So another way of putting this is you can think of the client is the extract part, right? The adapter is the transform part. The load part is basically when you save it. So it's transforming it into a model, right, into an instance. And then when you click save, you're loading it to the database. So extract it from the API, transform it, clean the data, save it in the database, right? And that's the load part. And that's it. That is ETL. And like I said, basically this fits into, then you can, now that the data is clean, then you can kind of, when people make a request to your API, you can just, retrieve it from the database. We're always kind of, programming is always about taking data from one format and converting it to another, right? So you can kind of think of think of our ORM pattern, right? We're taking data from our database, which comes to us as a tuple. And what do? We transform it to the instances, right? And that's what our ORM does, basically, right? Transforms it to the instances. That way it's easier to work with, right? We said it's easier to work with our objects than it is just to work with a tuple of data. Why? Because our objects have methods, right? We can call, receipt dot restaurant or whatever. So we're always just kind of transforming the data for how we need it now and then using that cleaned up data. Cool. So what's going to be next is actually, you can move through the readings and labs if you haven't already. What will be next is actually you choosing your own API and performing this. I actually think that this probably is a good step for you all because, if I did have like I kind of, just going through the quizzes, right? Another kind of thing is just to like think through like the big picture. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And I think like a little project probably will be good for that. So choose an API. It may feel challenging. Like I think for some of you, when you get to right now, you're at the stage where when you get to something you haven't seen before, it can feel a little nerve wracking. But just trust yourself a little bit. Like try to accomplish it, even if it takes a while. I do think that you're probably at the stage where you can build a little project, and that is kind of, I think that'll be really